Hello, everybody. My name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you for stopping by. This is a video which will be looking at the WSET Level 3 certificate on the Vineyard cycle. This is part 1 of 2. This part is available as free content on our YouTube channel as well as our portal. Part 2 will only be available to members of the Wine with Jimmy e-learning portal. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, please do get in touch via a number of different options. You can get in touch on this video by commenting on YouTube. So that's in the comments section below this video. And also make sure you subscribe, please. And then via the social media that you'll see at the bottom of each slide. Alternatively, we have our website, Wine with Jimmy, that has the e-learning portal on it, and you can get in touch with us via email on the contact us as part of that page. Okay, so let's get rocking and rolling for the Vineyard cycle. So this is going to be looking at dormancy, so winter dormancy, budburst, and then early shoot growth, early shoot and leaf growth of the vine. And here we've got a nice picture of very early budburst, nice close up as well. So what I'm going to give you first of all is an overview chart with the vineyard cycle. So you see all of the parts of the vineyard cycle there, split into a chart, and along the top axis of that chart is the Northern Hemisphere months running through from January to December. And then on the bottom is in fact the Southern Hemisphere running from July to June. So they are offset. So of course we can put the boxes in the center corresponding to when they happen in the Northern Hemisphere and when they happen in the Southern Hemisphere. So you'll see that we have winter dormancy in black, and that stretches actually here from around sort of November time in the Northern Hemisphere, May time in the Southern, and then through coming back round here to about March time in the Northern Hemisphere, and that's to the end of September in the Southern Hemisphere. And that goes for the same for budburst, that goes for the same for early shoot and leaf growth, flowering and fruit set, veraison, berry ripening, and harvest, finally. So on this presentation, we are looking at just these ones. So it's half of the year. We are looking at winter dormancy, budburst, and early shoot and leaf growth. So first up, we are going to look at the black boxes, which is a winter dormancy. So our dormancy time, November through to March in the Northern Hemisphere, and May through to September in the Southern Hemisphere. So let's go through a little bit about what happens in the vineyard during this winter dormancy. So first up, you'll see we have a picture there of a nice vineyard, which is still nice and colourful. See nice sort of lots of the beautiful autumnal and going into early winter colours there. So sort of the darker greens, the browns, the reds, some oranges and yellows as well. So as the weather becomes colder, of course, we are moving from our autumn into early winter. The growing season, of course, will begin to end, and this period of winter dormancy begins. The shoots, so all of those shoots from that current year that's just happened, the growth year, will lignify, meaning that they will turn to wood. So all those green shoots will turn to wood, and from this point they are known as canes because they are solidified, so they are known as canes. The leaves will begin to fall, and of course this is classic in late autumn as the trees start to shed their leaves and the beauty of color that you see. But of course it marks the point of cold weather coming in, our winter weather. The vine then is not operating photosynthesis. As soon as it starts to drop its leaves, it is not capturing the sunlight's energy in anywhere near the amount that it was, of course, during the growth season. So the vine switches its operation. It switches from, of course, photosynthetic operation to more of a storage operation, and it begins to store carbohydrates in the form of starch throughout its winter season. It's to get it through its winter seasons, but also to mean that it will have enough stored carbohydrates really to begin the next growth season in the next year. So there will be, after harvest, after the grapes are taken, there are still leaves on the vine. Of course, as soon as you take the grapes off, the leaves just don't go whoosh and drop down. There'll still be leaves, and of course the vines will be taking photosynthesis at that point, but storing the carbohydrates and not producing nearly as much glucose at that point. So it's storing those carbohydrates, and they will be stored mainly in the roots, but also some in the trunk as well, maybe some in the canes a little bit, but mainly in the roots. So a good developed root system is very important at this point. Okay, fine. So we know what happens, but there can be problems during these very cold winter months. In areas and regions and climates that have high continentality, that's high continentality, so that is the big seasonal difference between summer and winter, so therefore exceptionally cold winters are like this picture, for instance. The winter freeze can kill buds, of course, and the buds that they've not formed into any kind of shoots at that point, but remember they are dormant buds at this point, and they can still be killed by very bitterly cold weather. And in extreme cases, the whole vine can be killed by winter freeze. Pretty much consistent temperatures below minus 25 degrees Celsius will kill all Vitis vinifera. Nearly all Vitis vinifera. So very cold temperatures, sort of minus 15 degrees Celsius, quite repeatedly, will start to cause problems. And the problems tend to start around the graft point. So that is where the European top part was grafted onto the non-European bottom part, so the non-Vitis vinifera. That really is a weak point in the vine because you've cut those vines open and then melded them together. And that still is a weaker point, even when the vine is established. So that's where it tends to struggle significantly at that point. There are ways around combating winter freeze. If you are in an area which is quite consistently cold in winter, very big temperatures below zero, you can do building up soil around the vine graft, which is called hilling up. And that's because the soil underground is a few degrees, only a few degrees below zero, whereas the air temperature will be a lot below zero. But also in very extreme cases, and this is specific, quite specific to China, in the Ningxiao province or region, burying the vines, completely burying the vines during these bitterly cold months and then digging them up again. Very long and expensive, lots of labor required for this, but it is a way of protecting the vines during these bitter cold conditions. And then also during this time, winter pruning will take place. It's important not to do it too early as to impact the carbohydrate storage. But it will normally be done in the following, well, I say the following year, it depends on what hemisphere, but it will normally be done towards the latter end of the season when the vines are a bit more malleable and not so brittle. But, you know, in the Northern Hemisphere, somewhere around sort of February or March is quite common, but it's important not to do it too late. So winter pruning takes place during this time. Okay, so that is our dormancy. Next up, we are talking about budburst. So the vine has gone through its dormancy and it's started, of course, to grow. And that happens early at budburst. The vine realizes that there is warmer temperatures outside and it can begin its first stages into its growth season, and that is budburst. Okay, it occurs in spring and buds will swell and burst, and these are our compound buds, and they grow into new shoots, of course. And here you go, you've got some Budburst in action, and the holding picture, remember at the start of this presentation, was also of Budburst as well. So let's have another look. So Budburst is at the start, as I mentioned, of the growing season. And generally, this is around the average temperatures being at about 10 degrees Celsius, so about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So this temperature means that the vine will kickstart into its growth, but it is not so uniform across all of the grape varieties of the world. There are, of course, many different grape varieties, as we know, and they all act independently. So you will have certain types of grape varieties being called or classified as early budding, and then you'll have a certain amount classified as late budding as well, and of course in between. Early budding varieties, so this tends to mean, of course, they don't need as higher temperatures, are things like the old Burgundian varieties, things like Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Aligote. They all tend to bud quite early. A problem with this is that early budding means that potentially you have a longer spring, which runs the risk of having more frost and frost issues. There are late budding varieties, such as the Sauvignon part of the family. Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc are nice and late budding, so they often are much more protected against those spring frosts. But they also require very warm conditions, certainly Cabernet Sauvignon, so it is important for the season to be longer in that instance. Okay, I have mentioned spring frost. We won't go into the greatest amount of detail about it right now because that is covered in another videos of mine, which is around heat and temperature. But spring frost, of course, can happen at this time, and new shoots can be killed by these spring frosts, which can dramatically reduce yields and can actually destroy vines as well in very cold conditions. But this is particularly occurring in, of course, early budding varieties. And there is actually a preventative measure in this picture against spring frost, which is using heaters across the vineyards. But we will cover that in another video. That's covered in climate factors, the growing environment around heat. Okay, and also spraying will occur at this time. So if needed and practiced, spraying against fungal disease and pests will occur around this time. And here is the spraying of sulfur in the vineyards, which is a way of combating against powdery mildew. Okay, so we next come on to the early shoot growth and leaf growth as well. So this is looking really around, Budburst was March and April in the Northern Hemisphere and September and October in the Southern Hemisphere. And this is all around the same time, but a bit more elongated. So March through to June and September through to December. So this is our early shoot and leaf growth. And here is a picture of some of that in action. So you'll see some shoot growth there. You've got the canes, you've got leaves, you've got tendrils as well. And a little bit later than this, you'll start to get flowering and, of course, hopefully then fruit set as well. So shoots will grow very rapidly until the vine flowers. And initially, remember, this is fueled by the vine's carbohydrate reserves, which it had stored towards the end of the last growing season and during the winter in its roots. But as the leaves mature, they'll, of course, grow and get quite significant in size, and they start to absorb the sunlight. And, of course, that begins photosynthesis. So it needs those carbohydrates less from the roots. The vine will need a decent supply of water for this, and it will need a decent amount of nutrients as well during this time for its growth. The classic nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium to really get it going with good, stable growth. Also, if practice, shoots are tied to the trellis to ensure the canopy remains open a little bit like this one here, and the tendrils will attach itself to the trellis as well. Well, okay, that brings the first part of the Vineyard cycle to a close. If you are interested in following this part up with the remaining final part of the Vineyard cycle, that's on flowering, fruit set, color chain, veraison, berry ripening, and harvest. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, this is only available to members of my e-learning portal, which is at winewithjimmy.com. Please jump over there, have a look at it, and sign up to gain that exclusive access where there are hundreds and hundreds of videos to have a look at. Plus, we also have a huge amount of multiple choice questions, short written answer questions, and flashcards and revision sessions as well. We're constantly updating it and we're making it much more accessible. So please have a look at that. If you do have any comments, questions or concerns as earlier, please do comment on this video. Make sure you subscribe. You can get in touch also via social media found at the bottom of every slide or by the website winewithjimmy.com. If you do find yourself in my city, London in the United Kingdom, please come and see us for a class, a glass or a bottle. I've been Jimmy. Thank you so much.